My wife laughed. He's pathetic. I'll leave him right after the deed's in my name. Her mom called me a fool. I said nothing. But the judge took everything from her. Then came 26 missed calls. I never imagined I'd be one of those guys posting a story like this. But I need to get this off my chest. Everything blew up yesterday, and I'm still trying to process it. For some background, I'm Caleb, 35 years old. I've been married to my wife, Madeline, 32, for 3 years. We've been working hard to buy our first home together. Her mother, Patricia, 57, has been helping us out with the down payment. At first, I thought it was a generous family gesture. Looking back now, it was probably the first red flag. You know how it goes, when you're in love, you want to believe the best. You convince yourself that any weird feeling is just in your head. I wanted to believe we were a team. That was my first mistake. It all started last weekend. I was up on the roof of our rental house fixing some shingles that had blown off during a recent storm. Our landlord is a disaster. Slow to respond and completely useless when it comes to maintenance. So instead of waiting weeks, I grabbed a ladder and did it myself. I was nearly done when I heard Madeline's car pull into the driveway. She wasn't alone. Patricia was with her. They were laughing as they got out of the car, iced coffees in hand, clearly in a good mood. They headed around to the backyard, probably to enjoy the warm afternoon sun on the porch. They didn't know I was still up on the roof. I was just above where they sat down, tucked out of sight behind the slope. I was about to call down to say hi, maybe ask for a drink, but then I heard my name. Caleb's all excited about the house, Madeline said, and there was something in her voice that stopped me cold, a mocking edge. He keeps going on about how we're going to build a life there together. It's honestly pathetic. He clings to me like a lost puppy. Patricia laughed. Not a soft laugh, a cruel, bitter one. Men like him are so simple. He really believes you're putting the house in both your names. Nope, Madeline replied casually. I told him it's better to keep it under my name because of his credit issues. He totally bought it. Didn't even question it. My stomach dropped. Madeline continued. Once everything's signed and settled, I'll wait 6 months. Maybe a year, before I hit him with the divorce. Just enough time to make the place legally mine. Then I'll hit him with the "we've grown apart" line or something. He'll never see it coming. I was frozen. Couldn't even breathe. They kept talking, calmly, confidently, about how long they'd been planning this. How Patricia had been investing in me to gain my trust. How Madeline had been documenting every little mistake I made so she could use it against me in court. He's such a sucker, Madeline laughed. Remember when I gave him that Rolex and he actually teared up? No one's ever gotten me something so nice before, she said in a mocking tone. Meanwhile, I only did that so the neighbors would see us supporting him. Gotta build that narrative, right? You've learned well, sweetheart, Patricia said proudly. When I divorced your father, he tried to take everything. But I made sure he walked away with nothing. Now it's your turn to secure your future. They talked like that for 20 more minutes, laying out the rest of the plan. How they'd make me look unstable if I contested the divorce. How they'd use my long work hours against me. Every angle, every contingency covered. I didn't move, didn't make a sound. Just stared out over the neighborhood, trying to understand how the woman I loved could sit there plotting my financial execution with her mother like it was just another errand on their to-do list. Once I finished securing the final shingle, I climbed down the opposite side of the house, silent and invisible. Got in my car and drove straight to my best friend Bradley's place. We've known each other since high school. He's not just my friend, he's also a lawyer. One of the sharpest I know. I walked into his kitchen, sat down, and pulled out my phone. You need to hear this, I told him, hitting play on the recording I'd made from the rooftop. Bradley didn't say a word until it ended. He just leaned back, stunned. Jesus, Caleb, he finally said. That's cold. What are you going to do? I looked him in the eyes. I'm going to let them think they've won. And then I'm going to take their entire plan apart, piece by piece. The next few days were surreal. Madeline acted completely normal, even loving. She brought me coffee in the mornings, kissed me on the cheek before I left for work, asked if I wanted to binge some show together in the evenings. It was like she was trying to sell the illusion harder than ever. This morning, she kissed me goodbye and told me she loved me. Then, 5 minutes later, I watched from my phone as she called Patricia and laughed about how the paperwork's almost done. And he still has no idea. I'd installed a recording app on her phone while she slept. Maybe it wasn't the most ethical move, but after what I'd heard on the roof, ethics were no longer my top concern. What really got me was how casual they were. Like they'd already decided I was finished. Like I was just a speed bump on the way to their happy ending. They want me to co-sign on a house that costs $750,000, way above what we'd originally agreed on. That number would drain almost all my savings for the down payment. Madeline insists her real estate commissions will easily cover the mortgage. I've seen her actual earnings. She's not making anywhere close to what she claims. So right now, as they think I'm working a double shift, I'm actually at the bank transferring every dollar I have into accounts only I control. I've also frozen access to our joint savings. I didn't say a word to her. Just smiled and nodded like a good little husband. Next stop is the divorce attorney Bradley recommended. Someone with teeth. I've got recordings. Screenshots. Full message threads between her and Patricia thanks to our shared iPad. I have financial documents, bank statements, and a timeline of every manipulation they've tried to pull. Everything's labeled, backed up, and ready. But I'm not making my move just yet. The house paperwork is supposed to be finalized next week. That's when they think I'll be signing everything over to Madeline. That's when they believe their trap will finally snap shut. I'll be there, pen in hand. But it won't be my name going on anything. It's been 2 weeks since I first overheard the conversation, and every day has been a test of patience. A test of control. A test of my ability to pretend everything is fine when, inside, I'm on fire. Today brought a breakthrough. Madeline said she had an open house and would be gone for most of the afternoon. I used the time to clean up our home office, acting like I was organizing some files. In the back of a lower drawer, stuffed under old tax forms, I found a bundle of bank statements I'd never seen before. She hadn't even tried to hide them properly. It took me about 5 minutes to realize what I was looking at. Madeline had been lying about her commissions for months. Every time she told me a house sold for less than expected, she was pocketing the difference and funneling it into a separate account. The worst part? A portion of that money was being transferred monthly to Patricia. Bradley nearly choked on his coffee when I showed him. "Caleb," he said, spreading the statements across the table, "this has been going on longer than you think. These transfers to Patricia's account, they're systematic. Same time every month. And they start right after your promotion 6 months ago." I remembered how Madeline had reacted to my promotion. How excited she'd been. How she'd told me it was finally our time to thrive. I thought she meant together. Now I realized what she meant was time to milk more out of you. We brought Leah into the loop next, my sister and accountant. She's been helping me quietly on the side. I gave her the numbers and she traced them back to a property in another state. A beach house. Purchased through a trust linked to Patricia but with paperwork indicating it would transfer into Madeline's name post-divorce. So let me get this straight, they're not just planning to screw me out of the home I'm helping buy, they've already secured their next property. With my money. Their arrogance is staggering. Madeline came home tonight all smiles. "I was thinking we should go over the closing documents tomorrow," she said, handing me a plate of eggs and toast. "Mom's lawyer drafted some updated versions. It's all just temporary, of course, until your credit improves." I kept my face blank. Took a bite of toast. Nodded. "Sure. Whatever you think is best." She beamed like she'd won a prize. Then her phone buzzed. I happened to glance at it. Text from Patricia, "Did he sign yet? That idiot better not mess this up." Madeline froze. I looked at her. Slowly stood up, letting the chair scrape against the hardwood floor. "You okay?" I asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." She fumbled to hide her phone. Knocked over her coffee. "It's nothing. Just Mom being dramatic. You know how she gets." "Oh," I said. "Yeah. I know exactly how she gets." Then I pulled out my phone and hit play. The audio from 2 weeks ago, the rooftop conversation, filled the kitchen. Madeline's face turned to stone. White, then green. She exploded. Screamed that I was violating her privacy. That I was a lunatic. That I was spying on her like a criminal. Threatened to call the police. I just sat back down and started recording her meltdown on my phone. When she finally ran out of steam, I placed a business card on the table. "My lawyer will be in touch." Then I grabbed my jacket. "Oh, and that beach house you and Patricia are planning to share?" I said. "You might want to double-check the payment schedule." Would be a shame if the money stopped coming through. Her scream followed me all the way out the door. I haven't been back since. It's been 2 weeks since I left our apartment, and I've been staying with my sister Leah ever since. She cleared out her guest room, and while it's not exactly spacious, it's quiet, safe, and for the first time in months, I don't have to second-guess every word I say or wonder what's happening behind my back. Madeline has been texting nonstop. At first it was gentle, checking in, asking if we could talk, pretending she didn't understand why I was upset. Then came the guilt trips, then the anger. Now it's radio silence, which honestly is worse. But I've stayed focused. Every day since I discovered what she and Patricia were planning, I've been working on putting the full picture together, connecting every dot. And today we hit a turning point. While she was out, supposedly showing another listing, I went back to the apartment to grab a few of my things. I wasn't planning to snoop, but as I was going through the home office drawers, I found another stack of papers she hadn't bothered to hide. More bank statements, hidden accounts, and evidence of exactly how far the scam went. Every time she told me a property sold for less than expected, she was pocketing the real commission difference and stashing it somewhere I didn't know existed. Bradley took one look at the stack and immediately started building a case file. "Caleb," he said, pointing at the monthly transfers. "This isn't new. She's been doing this for months. And this," he tapped one of the statements, "goes straight to Patricia's personal account." We dug deeper. Leah helped me trace a series of payments leading to the mortgage on a beach house, one listed under a corporate trust tied to Patricia. A trust that, according to internal documents, would automatically transfer ownership to Madeline after a planned financial event, aka the divorce. They weren't just planning their future. They were already living it, before even serving me the papers they assumed I'd never see coming. That night, I sat alone with a notepad, trying to make sense of how long this had really been going on. 6 months? A year? I thought back to my promotion last year, the extra hours, the raised salary, how Madeline had been so proud and more involved than ever in our finances. She said she was helping manage our growth. Turns out she was managing a transfer pipeline from my paycheck into their retirement plan. The next few days were a blur of evidence gathering and quiet pretending. Madeline thought I was folding back into the routine, returning to her orbit. She sent me property links, told me the closing date for the new house was coming up fast, and reminded me we just needed a few more signatures. I nodded, smiled, told her I'd look over the paperwork soon. In reality, I was preparing for war. Bradley had started the process of filing for divorce. We were also working on an injunction to pause the house purchase. I didn't want her getting ownership of anything, not while she was still convinced she could outplay me. The trick was to keep playing dumb just a little longer. And it paid off. Yesterday morning, she called me, chipper as ever, asking if I wanted to come over and review the documents together. She said her mom's lawyer had simplified everything and that it would just take 10 minutes. "Just sign where it's marked," she said. "It's all temporary until your credit's cleaned up." That's what she kept pushing. That my credit wasn't good enough. That she was doing this for us. That I'd be added later. It was a lie, of course. My credit score had actually improved significantly over the past year. I even printed out a recent report and handed it to Bradley. He laughed. "This is cleaner than hers." It wasn't about credit. It never was. It was about control. Meanwhile, Leah uncovered something else. Patricia had registered a small LLC a year ago, some shell company. On paper, it looked dormant. But over the last few months, it had started purchasing properties, funneling the commissions back to Madeline. Not just as income, but as consulting fees. A clear attempt to bypass tax reporting. "This isn't just manipulation," Leah said, eyebrows raised. "This is fraud. We documented it all. Bank records, internal transfers, messaging logs pulled from our synced iPad, and of course the rooftop recording. By now I had a folder so thick it barely fit in my bag. All we needed was the perfect moment to drop the bomb. And I had just the one in mind. Madeline's family has a tradition. Every last Sunday of the month, Patricia hosts dinner at her house. It's formal, rehearsed, and always designed to show off her generosity and success. Madeline asked if I'd be coming. I'd love for us to show everyone we're still solid, she said sweetly. I told her of course I'd be there. What she didn't know was that Bradley would be parked down the street waiting for my message. That the manila folder I'd bring would hold not dessert but the legal end of her con. They wanted this to be quiet. Smooth. Clean. I was about to turn the volume all the way up. Sunday evening came faster than I expected. Patricia's house looked exactly like it always did: pristine landscaping, white stone pathway, matching lanterns on each side of the door. It was almost insulting how normal everything seemed considering what I was about to do. Madeline texted me an hour before, reminding me to come early so I could help move the dining bench, her mom's favorite way of keeping men in their useful roles. I responded on my way as if I hadn't been preparing for this exact night for weeks. I parked around the corner and texted Bradley, who was sitting in his car just out of sight. The manila envelope with everything, divorce papers, the injunction, financial records, was resting on the seat beside him. I walked up the front steps with a bag of pastries in one hand and fire in my chest. Patricia greeted me at the door with an overacted smile and 2 air kisses. So glad you made it, she said. Could you help move the bar cart to the dining room? Of course. I followed her inside. Madeline was in the kitchen with her, slicing bread and laughing like nothing had changed. You came, she said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. It's good to have you here. Wouldn't miss it, I said evenly. We set the table together. I poured water into crystal glasses while they talked just loud enough for me to hear from the other room. The closing is all lined up, Madeline said. He's totally on board. We just need signatures and it's done. Patricia was practically giddy. Once it's in your name, we can start the transition. 6 months minimum to make it look clean, and then you're free. He keeps asking about paint colors for the nursery, Madeline added, chuckling. Poor guy still thinks we're building a life. They didn't even care that I could hear them. That's when I sent Bradley a one-word text, now. 5 minutes later, just as we were sitting down to eat, the doorbell rang. I'll get it, I said, standing up before anyone could move. I opened the door and stepped aside. Bradley walked in wearing dark jeans and a blazer, holding the envelope casually in one hand like he was just dropping off weekend reading. Madeline's face froze mid-bite. What's he doing here? She asked. Just delivering some paperwork, I said calmly, returning to my seat. For you, actually. I handed the envelope to her across the table. She hesitated, then slowly opened it. Her eyes scanned the first page. Then the second. Then she froze. These are divorce papers? And a motion to block the house purchase, I added. Effective immediately. Patricia stood up so fast her chair screeched against the hardwood. How do you ambush us like this? In my home. Bradley held up his phone. I'm recording this interaction for legal purposes. I suggest everyone stay seated. Madeline looked stunned, then furious. You're ruining everything. After all we've been through? You're seriously doing this here? You mean after all you did? I replied. The hidden accounts. The fake commission numbers. The private messages planning my removal from the second we signed the mortgage papers? Madeline's face drained of color. I placed my phone on the table, tapped play. The rooftop recording filled the room, Madeline's voice mocking me, Patricia's voice encouraging her, both of them discussing exactly how and when to ditch me and take the house. Those recordings are illegal. Patricia barked. We'll have your license pulled, Bradley. In this state, Bradley said calmly, only one party has to consent. And guess who was holding the phone? I pulled out another document, a notarized letter Madeline had written declaring herself sole purchaser of the house due to Caleb's poor credit. Then I dropped my recent credit report on the table beside it. Turns out my credit's been higher than yours for over a year. You might want to rethink your defense strategy. Patricia lunged across the table, knocking over a glass of wine. Madeline tried to hold her back. Mom, stop. He's recording everything. I stood slowly and straightened my jacket. I've already notified the landlord to have you removed from the apartment lease. My lawyer will coordinate with yours moving forward. Madeline just sat there, eyes glassy, hands shaking. You can't do this. Patricia screamed. You're destroying our lives. No, I said. You did that. I just exposed it. By the time Bradley and I stepped outside, my phone had already blown up with missed calls. In the next 24 hours I got 17 calls from Madeline, 12 from Patricia, 4 emails begging to discuss things rationally, and 2 voicemails accusing me of being heartless. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I forwarded everything to Bradley. Then I made myself a drink and finally slept through the night. It's been 3 weeks since I served Madeline the divorce papers at her mother's dinner party, and honestly, the aftermath has been more surreal than the actual confrontation. The court hearing was scheduled for a Monday morning. I arrived early, folder in hand, wearing the same gray suit I'd worn to job interviews years ago, the one I used when I needed the world to take me seriously. Bradley was already inside, calm and focused, organizing our exhibits. He gave me a quiet nod. "Everything's lined up," he said. "We just need to let the evidence speak." Madeline walked in 15 minutes before we started. She was dressed in a tailored pantsuit, hair perfectly done, and carrying that same entitled air she'd always had when she felt in control. Her lawyer, some family friend with a flashy smile and too much cologne, looked less confident than she did. Probably because he'd read the evidence. She didn't look at me. Not once. The hearing started on time. The judge, a firm, no-nonsense woman in her 50s, asked for a summary. Bradley delivered it clearly and without drama. He laid out the recordings, the financial documents, the pattern of deception. He showed how Madeline and Patricia had coordinated to funnel money into a hidden account, how they'd prepared a narrative of emotional neglect, and how they documented fake contributions to my lifestyle. Then came the audio clips. The judge listened to Madeline laughing about manipulating me. Patricia saying men like me were easy to fool. It was all there, raw, ugly, undeniable. Madeline's face slowly crumbled. The mask of calm she walked in with didn't survive 5 minutes of playback. Her lawyer tried to object, questioned the legality of the recordings. Bradley cut him off gently but firmly. "Your Honor, this state allows one-party consent. All recordings were captured legally and with full documentation." The judge nodded. "Proceed." After 30 minutes, she didn't need any more. "This is not a case of simple marital breakdown," she said sternly. "This was deliberate, premeditated fraud. The court finds in favor of the petitioner on all claims." And just like that, it was done. I kept the entirety of the down payment. The home purchase was blocked permanently. Madeline was ordered to provide full financial disclosure. And yes, the judge ruled that she owed me alimony. Because of the fabricated income, the manipulated commissions, and phony client records, she had technically out-earned me. And since I'd proven the fraud was part of a coordinated scheme, the court deemed her liable for damages. I didn't feel victorious. Just relieved. Madeline stormed out of the courtroom halfway through the final paperwork. I didn't follow her. But things weren't done unraveling. Later that day, her phone started blowing up. Not with messages from me, but from her employer. You see, a few weeks earlier, Bradley had anonymously submitted evidence of her fraudulent commissions to the brokerage's compliance department. While we were in court, they were doing their own investigation. Turns out a lot of clients Madeline claimed to represent didn't exist or were shell companies connected to Patricia. When the firm found out, they fired her on the spot. She found out via email, right there in the courthouse hallway. According to what I heard later, she broke down crying in the parking lot. Patricia didn't fare much better. The IRS had been quietly alerted thanks to the forged tax deductions she'd claimed for business expenses, namely the fake payments to Madeline's account. Once that got flagged, an audit was triggered. Within a week, one of her boutique shops shut down. 2 more followed soon after. And then, the real twist, Patricia's other children, the ones she'd cut off years ago, filed lawsuits of their own, claiming fraud and misappropriation of family funds. Their entire little empire was collapsing. And I didn't lift a finger. I didn't gloat. I didn't brag. I didn't post anything. I just went home. To Leah's place, where I was still sleeping in the guest room. I cracked open a cold beer, ordered some Thai takeout, and watched a movie in silence. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt free. In the days that followed, I got flooded with messages. From Madeline. "Please, I didn't mean for it to go this far. You're destroying my life. Can we just talk one last time?" From Patricia. "You'll regret this. You've embarrassed this family. You don't know who you're messing with." From mutual friends. "Why are you doing this to her? You could have worked it out." I didn't reply to any of them. I blocked their numbers one by one. 2 weeks later, Leah and I went to tour a house I'd loved months ago, back before any of this started. At the time, it had been out of reach. Yeah? It was back on the market. Lower price. Seller motivated. I made an offer that afternoon. This time, the name on every page was mine. Only mine. Bradley called me after closing. "How's it feel?" he asked. I paused. "Quiet," I said. "And peaceful." Last night, I sat on my new back patio, beer in hand, cool evening breeze rustling the trees. I thought about everything. The betrayal. The recordings. The lies. The twisted little world they built. And how it all came crashing down, not because I shouted or got revenge, but because I stayed calm. I stayed smart. I let them hang themselves with their own rope. Sometimes karma doesn't come with thunder and fireworks. Sometimes it wears a suit, stands before a judge, and speaks softly. But damn, does it hit hard.